Now we're up on all the morning channels. Okay. Get ready, you're ready to start. Very exciting.
Is my audio live?
No, mine is, but yours isn't. There we go. Hit that like, everybody. Share the show. This is the 1 week of my sultriest voice before I move on to being the spokesperson for Super Sugar Crisp. Yeah. Come on. Sugar bear. Going. We gotta get started. I need to get a like a fade button so I don't have to time it out myself. And why is my camera all jacked up? I'm taller than I was. What happened? I've grown emotionally, or my camera like slid down on the rod that was holding it like during the night, which happens, man of my age. It's nothing to be ashamed of. Well, that's that voice you hear, maybe you don't hear, laughing in the background is our dear friend Rob Glenn joining us from Chicago right now, a place, by the way, that I will be coming to May 3rd. We're having a big WCPT gathering. Hey, Rob.
Hi.
And I've yet to spring this on him, but since I'm going to be doing a live version of the show and Johnny Million will be there as well, I feel like you should come down and join us.
Oh,
and
I'd
do
love
like
to.
a short segment on the Saturday show, and it's it'll be a good time, and it gives me an excuse to come to Chicago, which I will stay over for a couple of days anyways, and because I kind of have to. So May 3rd,
possible for us to do a short segment?
Well, we'll do the last segment. How about this? We'll do the last segment. I'll bump Phil on early. He can come on the last quarter of the first hour, and then we'll just fade off into like nerddom at the end of the show and just keep talking. They can cut the feed, but we'll keep yammering at the live event. That said, I wouldn't rule out some sort of Chicago. Maybe I could talk them into, and this is a serious thing, and I'm just kind of coming up, is we don't, we do Friday Eye as part of the live stream. It's not part of the radio show normally. But because of all the news about technology, AI, automation, whether or not, and I got to say, I guarantee the factories Trump is bringing to the country that he's bragging about, besides the ones that were started by Joe Biden, like the deals that were started by him, obviously and clearly to everyone. The ones Trump is all excited to bring to the country are 90% automated, including like the Tesla thing where he's bragging about, these cars are made in America, basically made in America, like that, like his kind of like ketamine Rain Man thing that he's been doing on all these shows. the Optimus, they literally are creating it less to make a production robot for consumers, because I wouldn't trust one. Look at their self-driving fucking cars on the road blowing up. You want a robot with that same self-driving kind of soul in it? No. But it could replace the last 8 to 12 people in the factory. And I think that's what he wants. I mean, I know it is. That seems to be it. So on that note, we didn't get to see you last week.
No.
And
welcome back, by the way.
Yes. Thank you. And I would like to say there are several. And by the way, you know what? Every time I try to push my voice back up into normal Hal voice, it starts to crack. So I'm just going to leave it down in sultry mode for this. So welcome to the super sexy, 100% live, non-AI pushed version of Friday AI with Rob Glenn from Root Design in Chicago. Now, there have been, since we last spoke, quite a few jumps in at least the unveiled technology. Mm-hmm. A lot of them around Nvidia, and one of the things about Nvidia and GM and Ford are really bad news for Tesla, because Nvidia, which is, I think this might be the first one. Maybe, I know we've always had these kind of like consumer electronics show kind of things where every company has its own little keynote, but usually it's been the big players, Apple first with these big kind of extravagant ones, and then Google and Microsoft kind of trying to do their own version with either Microsoft Xbox or something like that. And Google all of its features and yada yada, and then these kind of little punk ones that that OpenAI are doing, that are just little gatherings around a table that's a keynote or something that they just put out every so often. But Nvidia is the first almost single technology company in terms of chips and or cards up to this point that I've seen start doing their own unveiling kind of keynotes, like throwing their own fest, as it were, of gear. Did you watch
like
go ahead.
Does it. There's some other hardware companies that do it for sure, but they definitely probably are doing the biggest ones.
Yeah, it's not on scale. It's not these big staged performance things. They tend to do it in a auditorium at the facility where they work, where they do this thing for investors or whatever. But the Nvidia one had an audience that was very reminiscent of like Steve Jobs unveiling iMacs. You know what I mean?
I think the difference with Nvidia is they're sort of very strongly tied in with with what the technology is that's using them. So like if you want to talk about an Nvidia chip, instead of talking about the chip and whatever the details of the chip are, you talk about what it's used for, which is a far more compelling thing. And Nvidia is just so intertwined into so many things that it's easy for them to do that.
Yeah. So I've talked about the sort of, and you and I as well, about how you are with AI really being about machine learning. Mm-hmm. That chatbots and the OpenAI stuff is like this veneer on top of this, the actual thing, the real news, which is machine learning. Mm-hmm. And I feel the same way about people can talk about the Tesla bot and blah 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 and Optimus and yada yada and self-driving cars and all that push, but it's the substructure you have to pay attention to. And what's, who the companies to watch, if you were buying stocks, for example, and this is why everybody went to Nvidia and why they continue to. As a matter of fact, even as stock prices on tech stuff overall has taken, a hit because people started pulling because Tesla weighed on everything so much that it looked like correction territory. So people started leaving because they were in the big seven, which they did not belong in, by the way. But they were a drag on Google and all these other things. Now it's starting to reset, and it seems like people are taking their Tesla stock money and moving it into Nvidia and 3 or 4 other things, realizing that not just economically it's a good move, but also that's where the technological advancement is genuinely happening, is with these companies. Now, the there are a couple of stories that you and I have talked about, and I'm curious your take on it. And I'll go through a couple of them. These are the most recent ones. And I love the name of the uh, Nvidia chip computer set that they're doing. Vera Rubin is their name. I think it might be their VR ready um,
Mm.
chip. The idea that what makes it advanced is that it can do 3D rendering in real time if you have a headset on versus control with a mouse and stuff, which gives it milliseconds of time to render in a way that a headset is way faster.
Hmm.
So NVIDIA has unveiled this Vera Rubin super chip and partnered with General Motors. They also partnered with Ford. That's not part of the story. They've introduced this. It's designed to enhance AI computing capabilities across various industries. Additionally, NVIDIA announced a partnership with General Motors to integrate advanced AI technologies into GM's vehicles, aiming to improve autonomous driving features and in-car user experiences, which I think is the key. In-car user experiences.
Hmm.
Um, uh, like Rob Glenn, go. But
So first of all, the naming that their naming is always like famous scientists or
yes,
famous people in science or in technology. Vera Rubin is an astronomer, I believe, right?
yeah,
Um,
yeah.
typically, so then I actually haven't seen any announcements about their chips. So I'm not,
Oh, okay.
is it their underlying GPU architecture?
Yeah, so they have created, and I'll see if I can find the part of it. There's a couple of things. The uh
Oh, yeah, I
the
see it now. Okay.
yeah, but the important thing is the digit which they put out initially. Remember how they were going to put out this little supercomputer that would sit on your desk, it looked like a gold brick, and
Mhm.
I gotta say, while I was very excited about what was in it. And one of the biggest things about it is 128 gigabytes of RAM in it, which allows it to disperse that RAM and create. You could basically run an AI model at like, in the 50 million range, and which is very high, almost as quick as like early ChatGPT on your desktop, isolated, not connected to to the internet in any way. Um, it's very cool, but it came in this little gold box, and it looked like a douche. It just looked like a douche computer. It looked like something
Mhm.
like their main audience was like a Saudi prince who games on the weekends. You know what I mean? Like if there's a Saudi Elon Musk, that's the computer he would have on his desk. I have 35,000 of these. I bought every single one of them and gave them to all of my illegitimate children, and so that we can all play World of Warcraft together. Um, you know, it's so Nvidia's, the initial one on that was like, okay, that's impressive, and again, it's just the start. So obviously, a huge deal. Um, so if
Yeah,
that's
so
the first generation, holy shit,
I'm doing some quick some quick
yeah,
research on it.
yeah,
So GPUs, so a lot of the technology, like the actual CPU, the actual GPU, there's not a ton of increase in speed. Like the speed increases and the efficiencies are sort of, they're still getting better, but they're plateauing a little bit. There's not as big of a
sure,
jumps. Where
yeah,
the stuff is happening is in the communication between, let's say, the processor and the RAM, or in the
yeah,
case of the GPU, it's the GPU and the VRAM, which is the RAM that is specific to the GPU. Also, talking back and forth between the CPU and the GPU is important. So basically, like what they're trying to do is get all the things inside your big box of a computer to be as close as possible physically to
yeah,
each other, and then
right,
get them on one thing. And so then literally like the distance is shorter, so it's faster, kind of thing.
right,
It's a good way to think about it. And then the technology of all that interconnect, when you start to think about how like the AI system works, or an LLM in this case, as we talk about it a lot. Like you really need to sort of, you talked about like a maze like the other day, like there's all these
Yes.
choices along the maze. So you really need to kind of like very quickly go out and like try all the possibilities, if that makes sense. And you need to
Hmm.
report back and then go back and forth really fast. Um, and so, like almost all of their technology is that, but their hold on industries has more to do with the way that they work with developers, the way that they work with
Hmm.
different companies. So, like there was new. So Tesla started using Nvidia chips, and then I believe
Right.
what they did is they decided they were going to go straight to the chip makers and make their own version, and then it became the Tesla chip. But really, um, they sort of
Hmm.
decided that if they could control the hardware, that they might be able to like do things better with their software, and because they
Right.
work together so well, it would be faster or more powerful or something like that. That's kind of what Apple does as well. um,
Right.
so if you think of Nvidia as sort of like the Microsoft of old days, that anybody could use a PC to do anything, as
Hmm.
opposed to
Whoops. Sorry.
Apple glue problems with more glue.
Uh-huh.
With,
Tesla will solve glue problems with more glue. Was the thing? Sorry.
oh,
Uh,
yeah. So Nick Rich tells me I should say Tesla, not Tesla. Um,
Tesla.
anyway, so that's where Nvidia's power is, in their relationships and how like embedded they are in all things.
Yes.
And the people that start to say, well, we made our own chip, we made our, Amazon is trying to make their own chip, Tesla,
Yep.
Google, all of them, they're they're basically like making like a thing which is specifically designed for the task that they're doing, as opposed to
Right.
the Nvidia stuff, which tends to be more generalized. And that's why
Yes.
Nvidia is strong in this case, because
Yeah.
we don't know where it's going. So it's hard to focus on a particular aspect if you don't know what the end game is going to be.
Right. Well, and also that's a little bigger. It fits a little screen. There's Rob Glenn on Blue Sky if you want to follow him. Just so you know. Yeah. Thanks, Mark P. So I for all right for the who's at home. The thing that I've been saying is going to happen quicker and quicker and quicker. I still stand by the fact that there is a stacking going on in terms of the computers were kind of plateauing as far as their capability, and then AI comes in and gives you a way of workaround in that how it pulls um, the how it pulls together information is more efficient. And one of the examples, and so it allowed them to, on the same architecture, speed things up and make things better using AI to do certain things. And one of the most obvious examples is NVIDIA's graphics cards. The reason why they look so good is that they use AI now to, for every pixel they compute in a space, 25 pixels are assumed by AI based on what's around it, and they can
That's
add
basically it.
a 25 pixel density that wouldn't have been there otherwise because it would create too much heat, use too much energy, all this stuff. They're able to fill in that gap by assuming it based on the understanding of what you're playing, especially pre-programmed stuff like video games. You can, once it's articulated, the computer gets it and goes, "Oh, okay, yeah, that's a mountain, and the mountain has craggly. You want it to look craggly, but real craggly. Okay, so here's where that raindrop is falling down the stone. I'll make all the stone look like it's near that raindrop, and it'll look really cool. And those pixels
Yeah.
will do their job, right? So this is again the quick and dirty, but
So,
that
and
allows
let's
them.
talk about that for 1 second. So, the quick and dirty that you just said, how does that come into play? So, let's say that you have a 2K screen, and you want a 4K movie, right? You want to watch your movie in
Yeah.
4K. Well,
Hmm.
the number, so the GPU's got to literally calculate every single pixel on the thing,
Yep.
and it's probably refreshing at some rate, like 30 to 60 frames a second for maybe a normal TV. Some are up
Right.
higher. So every single second, it's got to process 4K worth of pixels 60 times, let's say, right? So you got to every time you get more quality, more refresh, more. Everything's more. So what they've done is their technology. It's like DSLD.
Right.
I can't remember the name of it. It's an acronym, and I'm terrible at acronyms.
Right.
It's basically taking let's call it a 2K screen. It's like producing a 2K image, and then it's using effectively AI to get the pixels in between so that it can show you 4K. And so it's filling in all the other things. And the thing to note there is so somebody said 480p versus 2K, 4K. So it could be doing 1080p and going straight up to 4K and showing you 4K. But when you go from 2K to 4K, I'm using that as an example. It's not double the pixels; it's 4 times the pixels, and that's what you have to understand. So it's like
it's
these
an
multiples
leap.
Grow a lot and fast.
Yes, and so Nvidia was great at the graphics computing on that level, and now they're finding that you can do that extrapolation in a lot of different areas. And and the biggest advance, I still think, and I will hang on to this, is the robotics world. We're gonna get there in a second, but and Tesla will the Tesla BS bot, the dipshit bot, will be 5 gens behind everybody else, even with these advances. And so let me show you something real quick, where that stacking is what people are counting on for these goals that were originally always like cold fusion, or nuclear fusion, 10 years out, and suddenly they went from maybe 7, maybe 5, holy shit, 2. Right? That's where a lot of these things are happening. Okay. The medical advances, which we'll talk about some as well, that are coming from just from the ability of trained AIs to just be looking all the time and looking in a way that a human being just can't. They're just tireless, I think, more than smarter as a tool.
Before you go there, let's talk about like a car. So a car that's self-driving, it's going to know where it's at based on a bunch of cameras, right?
Yep.
So this computer is getting streamed to it the reverse of your TV, basically, right? Like, so the TV, it's send a signal, and the TV's got to create an image 60 times a second. This computer is receiving 60 frames a second of an image, right? So just like Nvidia uses AI to sort of guess what's in between to make a bigger picture, in theory, the AI would work in a car in the reverse of that, where it would get an image, it would see the pixels, and it would have to basically guess what it's seeing. And so the more intelligence, I'll call it has, maybe, the more guessing it can do. And the more accurate it's going to do when it guesses. So if it sees a blob on a thing, it's going to say, well, that's a cat, or that's that's something I don't want to hit, basically.
Yes. Right.
Or that's something I want to follow.
Right. And in its structured programming that it follows, because it has to follow the rules of driving, it has limited responses that it can do. That's what the problem, I think, ultimately with full self-driving is. But we'll get to that at another time, because I want to show you an article from the NIH about Tesla full self-driving and the misuse of it, according to that.
Yeah, anybody that's used their lane following, and you're going along, and then all of a sudden construction, like you can recognize that there's a lane, even maybe if the lines aren't there, or the lines are double and one goes this way and one goes this way, but you just know, because you're like, oh yeah, I recognize that they're telling me to alter my path. Well, a car with a camera maybe doesn't know that and just keeps driving right into the barricades, right?
Yeah, exactly. And even if it does know what it is, it reacts to it too quickly if it hasn't been trained on on seeing far enough ahead if its cameras aren't aware. Or, and what you're going to increasingly see, I'm going to tell you what's going to happen eventually as FSD or close to it starts happening, is you're going to see that traffic cones are going to have RFID identifiers or some similar thing in them, so that anytime traffic cones are put out, they let all the self-driving cars around know, hey, a mile ahead there's these, in the same way that Waze or Google Maps will have, will often say there's a obstruction ahead or a traffic collision ahead or whatever, because people have programmed it in. There will be an automatic version of that anytime the police show up at an accident and put stuff around it, the barricade itself will be a smart barricade. I don't know why it doesn't happen already, because even with just GPS, even with your mapping, if you knew 5 miles ahead that cones were being put out, you'd go, oh shit, I'm getting off here. I'll take side streets. Even for real self-driving, that would help. And so that'll be part of the Department of Transportation under Hal Sparks' administration will create smart cones. And also smart.
That's a lot of people's ideas. So like, the fastest way to self-driving cars, people thought was, well, now you control the lane, basically. Like you make a self-driving lane, just like a express lane, maybe in Chicago or a large city, right?
That's right.
Or you do stuff to the road to specifically like have the car understand where it's at, let's say. The problem is you can't maintain roads like that. Like
right.
It would mean every road would have to be perfectly maintained. And when stuff started to fall off, or 1 mile of one road was wrong, then all of a sudden the car wouldn't know what to do, and you'd be killing people in that 1 mile. So
yeah, all that kind of crucial.
And the I would argue,
I would argue that humanoid robots and robots in general, little ones around the house, and the obvious one is the Roomba, are a way safer bet than cars. I still don't understand. Honestly, I still don't understand self-driving for non-drinkers that exists out there, because even like the only reason I can think of it as working is the same reason you would get an Uber instead of driving yourself home, is that your car can decide you're drunk or your dementia is too advanced and drive you back to the house. That's where it would have some value, I think, as opposed to why can't it just pull over and call someone? You know what I mean? Like OnStar for your son-in-law. This is your father-in-law's car. He's drunk again. But the interior house is like, the chances of a robot knocking you down a flight of stairs by accidentally bumping into you is actually smaller than a robot car missing its off-ramp and careening into a parking lot and, or a playground full of people. It really is, because of the speed and the weight of the vehicle itself. Like there's a shit ton of elements to a car, and this is why we license them, sovereign citizens, because you have the right to go wherever you want. You have free association and you can freedom of movement in the United States. You don't need a passport to go state to state, but you sure as fuck need a license for a car, because it weighs 6,000 pounds at minimum, and it can go up to, in most cases, 80 to 90 miles an hour at minimum, and it's hard to stop once it gets up to those speeds because it weighs 6,000 pounds and is going 90 miles an hour. And we need to know that the difference between the long, floppy pedal on the right and the wide, pushy pedal on the left, right? And that, we'd like you to check in on that. It's not much to ask, I would like to say, right? So, but a robot in the house that weighs 65 pounds and that can help you with groceries, more than likely, even if it started trying to beat you up, you could probably take it in a fight.
Maybe.
But
a 60-pound object could, like a 60-pound 6-axis robot, it'll F you up.
Yeah, that's true. But so good that's the same difficulty you have if you have like a Labrador Retriever who is really rambunctious. It's almost worse, because once a dog bites down, a robot can at least be unplugged. You don't even have to old yeller a robot that goes wrong. You could just right. You and believe me, there's going to be a thing on some robots that not only has a like a kill switch on it that like turns it off, but ejects the arms and legs
Oh
in some
gosh.
cases. You know what I mean? Like if you hit the magic button, it just goes, puh. You're like, you can snap it back together. You just, once once the problem goes away, just click it back in place. Now, here's why I think the robot thing is going to stack. Let me show you this real quick. Rob Glenn, if
You
I
mean it's going to
may.
speed up? You mean when you
Yes.
say stack,
Yeah.
you mean speed
When
up?
I say stack, this is what I mean. Sorry. I'll put you up in the screen and then I'll publish this out. When I say stack, what I mean is growth on top of growth,
Hmm.
exponential shifts in stuff that are going to happen, and any growth in the area adds to growth in the area. And this is you see this in advances in medicine, the mRNA vaccines, for example. Our first introduction, most of us, to the mRNA vaccine was COVID. And for all the right wing freak out about it and all them trying to put Kennedy in charge of the NIH and fuck everything into a cocked hat, they're still moving forward with the mRNA vaccines. And now we have already seen mRNA vaccine possibilities for cancer, and the HIV one that they've worked on looks like it works. And more than likely, they're going to. And on top of that, AI is helping them shape these mRNA vaccines because of how they are designed. Because every old one used to be, if you asked AI how to do a traditional vaccine, it'd be like, find a dead cell structure of it and put it in a solution and inject it in somebody and they'll have immunity against that version of the virus. That's how it worked before, and that's what it will tell you for the most part. It might tell you the details and the steps and how to actually chemically do it and in what materials you'll need, but that would be the process. mRNA, you have to build these kind of things from scratch, and so but once you do, it's done. And in cases of like HIV, there aren't variations like there are with the flu and stuff, the easier caught ones, because it's harder to spread. Same thing is true of Ebola. You could wipe out Ebola. You could wipe out polio with an mRNA vaccine, unlike one where you have to do booster shots and stuff like that. So huge step forward, and it's going to stack. This is the thing that Nvidia announced that I rest my case that the robot advancement stuff is going to advance at a stupid pace over the next 2 years. It already has, but it's going to accelerate basically starting now. And this is so Nvidia introduced this thing at their little gathering, their giant gathering, called Isaac Groot N1. I am Groot, right? That's adorable. N1. And again, I want people to keep track of the number of ones you see. This is first gen of these things. If the first gen is like this, holy shit. Now, that said, this is the world's first open humanoid robot foundation model and simulation framework to speed robot development. So what they're doing is they're saying, okay, if your robot is a humanoid, if it's got shoulders and elbows and fingers and a neck and knees and hips and ankles, and it's used for basically this structure, you can take our simulator and whatever your design is based on, whatever your actuators are to move its shoulders, whatever your battery system is, you can put all that in there, all that information, design it basically from the ground up, and then you can improve it using AI, which will tell you where it's going to run into problems as far as mobility, battery usage, heat, all that kind of stuff, and you can train it. Now, we've seen the Eureka system that NVIDIA put forward that allows you to train robot parts and robots themselves in different terrain in a totally virtual environment. There is a similar one of these for Astro or whatever, the Hyundai / Boston Dynamics bot that is really advancing quickly. They created their own. It's not that hard a program to have. The difference is that NVIDIA made it available to everyone. And this goes to your developer point, that they're getting in the ground level of the architecture necessary. So if you're trained on the NVIDIA chips, you go, hey, if you want to build this, and you build it like this, then you can assume that if you need a driver, one of the suggested drivers for it would be our NVIDIA chip or whatever, I'm sure.
Yeah. So
And yeah,
this is like, so if you wanted to write a book today, uh, you just sit down and write the book, right? You didn't have to invent letters and words and a
Yes.
language and a history for what those languages meant, right? You just wrote the book
Yep.
because those things were all well established. So that's effectively what this is. So Omniverse, Omniverse is basically Nvidia's cloud. I'll
Yeah.
call it their cloud-based, like they're kind of like their version of Meta. Um,
Mm-hmm.
Meta, like that's Meta's what they call the virtual space, right? Or
Yes.
do they? Yeah. Okay. So think about Omniverse as being like Nvidia's cloud for uh, like models of like what they call them digital twins. So
Yeah.
if you wanted and then all of this is simulation. So like
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to maybe stop saying AI and start saying it's a
Yes.
simulator and a trainer.
Yeah.
So
Right.
so if you want to simulate first a robot, you need to build the house that it's going to walk around in or build the
Yeah.
road as well. So it's not
Right.
just the robot that you might be developing, it's all the other stuff. Or we do a lot of machining work, and there's
Yeah.
simulation. After you coded the machine to work, you simulate whether the stuff inside is going to run into each other, right? Well, in
Yeah.
order to do that, you've got to build the machine and you got to build all the stuff that's inside of it. So that's basically what Omniverse is.
Right.
So if I was a person developing this hand, right, I might have just
Mm-hmm.
modeled and designed the hand and the motors and where they went and all that stuff. Um, but there's all kinds of other stuff I would have to start from scratch from to like
Right.
simulate it. So they kind of like
Yeah.
give you the simulator, if that makes sense. And then then
Yeah.
the other stuff, the humanoid, what I think that is probably like it's like a physics engine and probably like the bones of a skeleton that
See.
start to have most of the information that you need. So most humanoid robots are going to have the same joints as a human does, right? So, and they're going to, and the physics that happen to a human body as you do stuff like run, jump, all that stuff, grab things, that's going to be consistent as well. So this Omniverse is not unlike Unreal Engine for
Yeah.
video games.
Yeah.
In fact, it's almost exactly the same, except they've added uh, like rigs and things into it that accelerate your development, so that you don't have to start from scratch on all of these things.
Yes, you also don't have to destroy your prototype anymore to do it. So the one
Right.
big problem, the thing that Boston Dynamics is like NASA in a lot of ways, in that they did all the hard work of this stuff. They created, and this is the self-driving vehicle, what a car sees, in this part. And this is again, welcome to Operation Wetback 2.0, where that came from is the advances in farming that are coming from AI. Get ready, but in all these circumstances. They are building on top of what we've already seen. Some of this is already in motion. Some of this they're working on right now. But it is all the training of these things, like you're saying, is happening at such an accelerated rate. And you don't have to, like Boston Dynamics, they would train these things and then they would fall over and break. And it took them weeks to rebuild the model and put it back up on its legs and then get it start running. The Summer and I went to NASA when we were in Florida, or actually, I think was it the Texas one? We went to the Texas one. And they had one of the NASA robots there that they've been working on for a long time. They have the upper body one that is they want to be able to do work. And they had it and they were working on it. Since we saw it, like while we were there, basically they were dismantling elements of it so that they could rebuild it using a structure like this because they could train it so much faster. But they were doing all the hard work. Now you can do this virtually, and if your thing virtually falls down a flight of stairs, it doesn't cost you 8 weeks to redevelop the damn thing. Okay,
Right.
there's
So you can try. You can basically try a lot of things, and as you're trying those, you're essentially focusing in on what has the highest probability of working, and then you actually build the thing that has the higher probability. And along the way, you might have also learned some things to look for when you get that physical model made.
Right.
And so you're prepared to deal with those problems. And you might even have solutions for them already. So the acceleration comes effectively from very high level simulations, like very
Right.
sophisticated simulations. And the barrier to entry
So
for those simulations is incredibly low, assuming that you want to make something that is like what everybody else is trying to make, which is effectively a dog robot or
yeah,
a
or a
humanoid
chicken
robot or
in this case.
a chicken, like whatever
So
the
right.
thing is that you're trying
So
to do. You want
yeah.
other
So
people to have tried it to have that information.
right. And now you can do that virtually and stack upon this. Now where does this go? And this is where I'm getting to really quickly. Okay, so they first of all, this is why we bring Rob on, because he's super, super smart. And let me dumb down some of this stuff for you as well. But in the meantime, he was saying you need some sort of physics engine for this whole thing to figure out how it works. Now, Nvidia has been great about video games, and that's what made like these like Call of Duty games, like you jump off a roof, and if it's high enough, you'll die, and if it's not that high, you'll kind of your character will go ugh, or whatever, and it will take him a second to stand back up or whatever. Those kind of things take a lot of processing power, but they're great for training robots later. And I've said for a long time that Call of Duty is the training environment for the future military gear. Get used to the idea that, I mean, there's going to be people fighting against them in both this. I think there's a game. Well, there is a game called Helldivers where they use a lot of like rovers and walkers and that kind of stuff. All that physics, which is legit, is programmed into this thing. So if you built a physical version of that, it should behave relatively close as long as you had a power source and a control mechanism and the AI that was running it into that thing. You'd have it in a matter of months as opposed to a decade, right? Okay, so they announced
a video game that's simulating, let's say, a World War II battle. Like you have to have models of all the things you see, like trees and hills and rocks and tanks and all that stuff. So that's the digital twin that I'm talking about. They literally have models of that. And then you simulate the war inside the digital twin. And that's effectively a video game. So you play the video game, but their stuff can simulate the video game a million times.
This would be so video games and Nvidia's link to that. It's sort of like how the chatbot AIs are trained on the internet. You use social media. They take social media, like Grok takes everything on Twitter, and it trains the AI model on how people interact on social media, which, by the way, is not how people interact, which is the ironic part of it. Computers, one of the biggest leaps that AI is going to have to do and has been making is in talking to people individually, because people are a lot more polite when they hear the other person's voice. So the AIs that are trained, like open AIs that have been trained on somebody talking to it, are a lot more socially adept than the ones that were mostly reading off how people tweet at each other, like Grok. That's why it's trained to be a dick. So they released this. First of all, Rob is very smart, and that's why he was said there's a physics engine. Newton is the physics engine that Nvidia has put out, and that's why I wanted to bring this up. They announced this as well as the physical twin, the physical AI twin for the robots you design. And working with Disney, these little robots, if you go to the Star Wars area, they were teased out like a year and a half ago. And now they're out on the regular. And pretty soon they'll be out without a handler. You won't have to have somebody walking around near them to make sure they don't step on you. Now, these are little tiny things, so they're not going to hurt anything, and they're adorable. But Jensen Huang had one of these little guys come out completely autonomous. Initially, the ones they have at Disney had one computer in them, which was like proximity shit in the chest so that it wouldn't bump into people. Now it's got two computers in it, one that houses its built-in AI that references the net but does not need it. It is autonomously AI-driven robots at Disney today. Like that's what they are. Now, they still, for safety's sake, because it's the happiest place on earth, they're not going to just kick them out the door and have them wandering around. They're not going to have giant AT-AT walkers walking around going, it won't step on anybody, it'll be fine. Because you can do Jurassic Park territory really quick in that circumstance. But let's see if I can. I'll see if I can find the footage of him talking to that thing and share it with you real quick. But the robotic simulation stuff is what is speeding this along, and that's the part where I think nobody has a bit in the mouth of this horse. It is running away with itself because there's no reason to not try to get it faster and cleaner and better and swifter. And where's most of the money come from? Big industry.
That's why
and
building
defense.
robots is probably not the business you want to be thinking about right now.
Right.
And the reason, you started to talk about Tesla and then GM and Ford and them catching up. One of the reasons, so GM and Ford, an internal combustion car is incredibly complicated. And there's a ton of parts that have to come together and they all have to fit and they all have to work together. An electric car is much easier. It's literally like, it can come down to literally an assembly, which is a motor and a wheel. And you just bolt the motor and the wheel to each corner of your car. And you've got a car, right? So at that point, the advantage that, if that were an internal combustion engine and it was replaced by effectively the motor and the wheel, then GM and Ford have no advantage anymore. There's no barrier.
We already have
really low.
And we already have, like, as funny as, like, he's, next year we're going to have the cyber cab is going to be blah, blah, blah. It's not even going to have a steering wheel, but they're already running those ads for those little Zoot cars or whatever they are that are actually here in Las Vegas that people are using as little mini taxis, but they're basically mildly autonomous subway cars for minimum numbers of people. It's an Uber meets a mini subway car. Let me show you something real quick.
I was trying to connect that to.
Yeah.
I was trying to connect that to, in the reverse, Tesla doesn't have an advantage because GM and Ford can literally just bolt motors onto chassis, and they're really good at making chassis. So their barrier to entry to compete with Tesla is really short. They're really small.
And they've got lots of models. They've got lots of different cars in lots of different categories already tested for speed and collision and all those kind of things. That if the engine, the only thing they would factor in is the engine gets smaller and cooler and those kind of things. But it doesn't affect how fast they could get to market with it.
Right. So right now, the barrier to entry, I'm using that as an example to now talk about robotics, like you're talking about here. Right now, the barrier to entry is articulating limbs, basically, and controlling those limbs in such a way that they can actually function. So the first thing that this is working on is balance. It's a bipedal thing, and it's got to walk without falling over, right?
Yeah.
Once that's figured out and it becomes effectively like open source, then you don't need to go do that anymore, right?
Right.
And that's the point of what Nvidia is doing in that first article. They're basically saying, we've got this bipedal balancing figured out. Like, Segway was, everybody thought, Segway was like the most brilliant thing ever. And then, 2 years later, there's Chinese hoverboards coming out that work exactly the same. Maybe not 2, maybe 5, but you get the idea. The same thing will happen here with robotics, where now it's like amazing that you have an arm that has like 20 motors in it, but it won't be long until that arm is just like the motor and the wheel bolted to a chassis. And the software is going to be the same thing.
And they just put the software, and they just put this open source software that allows you, if your structure is the same basically as a humanoid, you can add whatever you want. You can make it have Nightcrawler fingers, or you can have, you could have it be a cosplay robot that you intend to have at Comic-Con, or you could have it be a home robot, whatever you're building it for. You got this secondary structure to build it on top of, like the printing press. You suddenly have a printing press and you're like, shit, the distance between me and a published book is so much. Like, look at self-publishing in books in general. The idea that there used to be fucking scriveners, monks who would rewrite a copy of every book, and a book was precious because to get another one, someone had to copy the fucking thing from scratch. And then we get the printing press, that speeds along. Now we have laser printers. You can basically, if you have the paper, which you can go to Home Depot and get, I guess, the distance between you and an entirely printed 3,000 page manuscript is not a decade like it was. It's an hour, right? Now, let me show you real quick. I want to play this for you because I know we're getting very much into the reads today on Friday Eye, and there's a reason for it because, again, this is a wall that is coming, and the question is, when are we going to hit it, and what will the Trump administration's response be to it? So let me show you what this is. Just
my main point before you do that is don't worry about all the robots coming. Like, they're coming. Think about what they're going to do. So if you want to think about where your money is going to be made in the future, it's right back to, what is the robot doing? Like, what value can I get a robot to do to I don't know, make money, I guess, or whatever. So look at the application. Yeah. Because the delivery mechanism, which is the robot, is going to become a commodity if it's not already there.
Yes, agreed. So this is the little Disney bot, and there are a couple of important points that come from this. So they showed it on a screen, and then this little platform raised the actual thing up live into the thing, and it's autonomous. The point they were making with Jensen Huang is,
tell me that wasn't amazing.
It just,
hey, Blue.
It knows. Yeah.
How are you doing? How do you like your new physics engine? You like it, huh? Yeah, I bet. I know. Tactile feedback, super real time. Can you imagine just now what you were looking at is complete real time simulation? This is how we're going to train robots in the future. Okay. All right. Hey, Blue, listen. How about let's take them home? Let's finish this keynote. It's lunchtime. All right, good. Right there.
So he tells it to go stand over there, and it walks over and turns around on its own. And the Disney Imagineering staff, you can tell they put all the kind of animation aspects of things in it that make it personable and all that stuff. This is, I like it. I can't wait for this to be a norm all over the park. I think one of the things that robots can do more than any other thing is relieve the torture of sweaty mascot actors in these giant suits that can only be in them in the California sun for 20 minutes without losing 18 pounds of water weight and and passing out. They used to have like Mickey's just fall over a long time before they had rules about how long they could stay out. And they built air conditioning systems in the helmets now and all that kind of stuff. But that could be ended. And you never have to worry about, like, who's in there? What kind of criminal record may they have? What did the background check miss? To have all of that available. And then again, things that are impossible. And this is where I want to talk about where I think the potential is. And I want to hear Rob Glenn's response to this. So we've talked about a lot about how robots as the new immigrants, and this is what Elon Musk wants, is that they're going to do all the farm work so we can get rid of all the Mexicans and the South Americans, because that's all they do. They do the jobs Americans don't want to do. So we'll get robots to do the jobs Americans don't want to do, and we'll get all those people out of here. That's clearly the plan, clearly how they think things are going. He thinks he's going to get the government contract for that kind of work, the kind of work the government needs done that you can't hire people to do. And I'm not talking about like Terminator assassins. I'm talking about like drudgery. But that's going to happen. I believe the value of robots is not just in an AI, is not just the jobs that humans don't want to do or don't have the time to do or that would take half a century for a human to do, but that we automatically said we can't do that. Why? Because somebody will get killed. Like, we can't even start down this path. It takes too much work. There's no way to do that. You couldn't possibly afford the number of human beings, the pyramids. You couldn't possibly afford the number of people it would require, and it's too fucking dangerous, and none of them could be strong enough. And if anything went wrong, a giant sandstone brick would land on 30 people and squash them about every 18 minutes during this process. No pyramids anymore, right? Last time we did that, we had 40,000 slaves from every possible area, and we burned through them like cigarettes trying to stack these rocks and all this kind of shit. And we're not doing that again, right? That's basically how, look at the Mayan temples. Like, how'd you build that? If I told you, I'd have to kill you, like all the people that helped us build it, right? But genuinely, I think robots' value is in doing things not just that humans don't want to do or that's too dangerous, but things we have written off, perhaps for centuries. Because if we start that project, we'd never be able to finish it. Jesus Christ, that'll take 50 years in the materials and da-da-da-da. Like, it's impossible. But if you had robots working on it 24/7, you could build mega structures. I've always loved the Tyrell building in Blade Runner, right? But there's no fucking way humans built that. Individual humans couldn't.
The mega structure even needed? Like,
right.
Also it would be in like in usefulness, right? Like like a pyramid takes up a lot of space for one guy to get buried, right? Like, so what's the usefulness of that?
Well, no, that wouldn't be my example of it. What I would say is that, let's say we have 8 decrepit city blocks or whatever, building a skyscraper in that area that would be great for everybody, or not even a skyscraper where it's tall like the Sears Tower, but a giant pyramid-esque structure that takes over those 5 blocks that has tunnels through it, so traffic continues. You keep all the streets and street lights, and it's got a base layer that's a mall and all kinds of stuff like that, and then tiers up to really impressive and attractive apartments. But it doesn't have to worry about swaying in an earthquake zone. But it's a structure that is heretofore impossible right now, because the money that would be required to build it is just fucking stupid. But if you got to 0-point labor, and you have robots that lay pipe and pour concrete and all that kind of stuff, and if one of them falls into it, and they can just remove his programming via Wi-Fi and put it in another one so he wouldn't feel lonely, and just let that body expire when the battery goes out. You wouldn't feel terrible about it the way you would feel about somebody being Jimmy Hoffa in the middle of building a giant thing like that, and the insurance and all that. Like, there's a lot of reasons why you're like, the number of construction people you would need to satisfy the needs of people who live in big cities right now and make housing affordable, so that childcare is affordable, so that schools are affordable and modern and all that stuff. You could, here's an impossible structure situation, and this is what I think. Appalachia. So growing up in Peaks Mill at a little schoolhouse that I went to, in town in Frankfurt, in the capital, the high school was the old high school that had always been the high school, but middle school didn't come into into like popularity, into vogue until like the mid 70s, really, where they separated out the early teen years to keep them so the high school kids could focus and the elementary school kids wouldn't have new teenagers being dicks around them. They'd kind of isolate them out. So the middle school in my town was the nicest building of all the schools because it was the newest. They built this structure. It had its own field for playing games on it. It had this modern kind of squarish structure. The hallways were laid out so you could organize where the kids were. There were more bathrooms, there, and they weren't isolated, so kids couldn't get up to chicanery in them like they did in high school. All right, but that building was relatively small compared to the high school. But even though it had 3 grades to 4, doesn't mean necessarily you've got fewer students any particular time, right? You could have a very small class going through at one point just because of birth rates, and the high school could have less people in it than middle school. But to build a educational structure like that everywhere in Kentucky, that was Frankfurt. That was the capital. The capital had a nice one. And Frankfurt High, which was arguably the black high school in Franklin County, because Franklin County High is like the white high school in Frankfurt, where I grew up. We had accidental segregation just because of where they were, location. Mm-hmm. The one that was downtown, near the Capitol, near the library, near everything, which was, I would argue, the better school, ended up being the black school because that's where everybody lived. And then the white school was just, they had a piece of field someplace, and they just went, we're going to need a high school at some point for these dumbasses, the ones that don't go into the military at 15. So they built that one there. But throughout Kentucky, Pikeville, which just got flooded, the rebuilding after a flood, another great example in this same area. You could bring new school structures that are equal to the school structures that are in Frankfurt to Appalachia and all these other places for next to no money compared to what it would used to be. I mean, they used to just go, we don't have the money for that. Fuck these kids. And even if you wanted it done, raising the money to do it, great. That's one county. What about the next one? What about the next one? What about the next one? That I feel like in a Sparks administration, the focus of robotics in terms of the government would be to build schoolhouses, build government buildings, build, like there would be joint residential areas where if you had an impoverished area like in Baltimore where they have those row houses with fucking lead paint, asbestos clearing, lead paint clearing. There are, I want to say like 16 former mental institutions in this country, the ones Reagan shut down. One of the reasons they can't reopen them is because of asbestos and lead. And getting people in there in fucking coated outfits and having to shower themselves like they're working with nuclear fucking materials is so expensive and dangerous that those buildings rot. They sit useless because the cost of danger in human life and expenditure, the number of people and getting rid of the shit and being around it, we've just written it off. We've just said we can't do that. That's where robots go. That's my thought on this.
Yeah. I mean, you're basically talking about changing the dynamics of the cost side of every
labor.
Not every, but most equations, you change the cost side. So you know, if a house, which is very expensive these days, became a quarter of what it costs to make, then what happens to home prices, right? If you can more quickly make them. The example I thought of while you were talking before your examples was like I think it's Minneapolis, Minnesota. There's public areas that are connected by tunnels so that in the winter you can have effectively like public spaces and move around inside the city without going out in the snow because there's so much snow. Or out in the cold. Right. So like, in public spaces in all kinds of areas, maybe it's, heat in the summer or cold in the winter, or just being in a different area, like as climate change happens or different other patterns happen, you're going to need to consolidate in different areas. So there's all kinds of reasons for it. But I think the basics of what you're talking about are it's the equation that you talked about. You talk about with Chinese goods, like effectively what going to China to make cheap goods did is it increased the cost of, or increased the level, the quality of life while decreasing the price that cost. And the quality of life is that everybody has a TV and a toaster and an iron. And each one of those things collectively didn't cost you $1 million, right? They cost you a few $1,000.
Things only royalty or the super rich had are quickly going to become within the grasp of the average person, the average middle class person. And the cast off from that, because as somebody who loves reclaimed gear and leftovers, as far as technology goes, and my whole life, like my buddy Rob, I used to run his the computers for, he was a producer of game shows. He directed and produced game shows. And that's how I met Rob and his partner, Rob. Peter. Yeah, different Rob, other Rob Fiedler. And Rob Fiedler directed the Rose Parade every year and stuff. He's a dear friend and I love Rob. And I lived in his house in exchange for labor, effectively. That was how I paid my rent early on. And I would do, he had a bunch of computers for doing computer editing, but also for running game shows, which are really complicated. They're really annoyingly complicated. So the early programming on these kind of things, we would work up on these computers. And then when he would upgrade, I would just use the old shitty one. And I would keep it running and I would use it to edit my sketch comedy, shorts and that kind of stuff. that cast off allowed me to produce events for my fellow comics at places and print up our own flyers and shit like that. That was outside our price range previously because we couldn't promote like other people could promote because we could afford to pay for the flyers to be done. Now you can just print them up. That democratizes the effort of promotion. Okay. Very similar to like AI writing people's marketing stuff. Let me show you something real quick. This is,
Can you hold one
Yeah.
second? Is there another guest coming
nope.
today?
Do you need to run out do I lose you in an hour?
No,
Yeah.
I was expecting a guest, so I didn't go to the restroom before.
Oh, well then
So I can
don't worry.
stay till 1, but I need a break for 2
Oh,
minutes.
yes. Yeah, no, you can do that. I'll just tell you what this is, and you'll give you a thought moment, and then I'll go to just me and the screen for while you take a break. Don't forget your mic is on. So that said,
I was about to hit mute.
this is a $43,000 prefab container home. That's all I'll tell you. That is made in a factory and delivered. And Rob will take a break now, and I will go to this with everybody else. Boink, there you go. And he can run off for a moment. And when he comes back, I'll see him there. Now, this, ladies and gentlemen, chat room, this is not like even the top end of the kind of prefab houses that are. Now, I had a show, full disclosure, a few years ago, pre-COVID, that I was pitching to HGTV called Prefabulous. And then I had a compendium show that was the primary one I was pushing called Print This House. The idea was to really show people 3D printing and housing and all that kind of stuff. I still want to do it, HGTV, and I will help you do it. And I'm charming as all get out. But this looks like your local dispensary. I don't doubt it. Most of them are containers. Lots of windows to clean. Yes, it is. I agree. You don't have to get all the windows. This is the full window package, I would have no doubt. There's also window cleaning robots now. You just throw them on the window and they go, and then they move down to the corner and you pop them off and put them on the next one. That said, and again, this is, let me see if I can show you this. This is it on its little plot of land. This is the interior of the living room. That's what the kitchen looks like. There's the toilet. It's even got a bidet, fancy pants, and a weird little voyeur window if you've got freaky neighbors or you like to flash the deer. Deck out on the outside of it. There's an upstairs area where the bedroom is. That's the interior of it. And this is how it shows up. It shows up in a truck. Now, at present, this thing is built by humans. Largely, hard to keep warm or cool. Not really. The insulation on it is pretty profound, and the windows on it would be double pane. But the point I'm trying to make is like this is just I just grabbed this as a like a light example of these kind of things. Chat room, and Rob's coming back. I want to bring in the chat for 1 second. There I hear him again. We're all free and clear. Excellent. Hi, chat room. So this is that house that I was showing is just one example of many. That one is available on eBay for $44,000, $43.99. There's one. Let's see if I can show you this one without revealing too much. Yeah, there we go. This is another one. And you'll see where I'm getting with this. This is a 40-foot by 20-foot, which is nothing to sneeze at, prefab modular container home for 30 grand on Amazon. And it arrives, let's see if we can pop these out. You can look at this. This, and again, these are not even, this is a container home kind of style, although I don't believe that this one's just rawly made as a prefab. When robots start making these with panels on sites within the next 3 years, which is going to, that's, Leslie, first one I showed you was on eBay. The other one I showed you, this is on Amazon. Okay. Oh, sorry. I forgot to switch over a published page. Here it is. Sorry. This one. That was my bad. Sorry. Whoops. This one. This is on Amazon for 30 grand. $30,000 delivered. You basically unpack it and you'll attach the stairs. It's an IKEA house. But the point is, it as a starter home, this beats. I mean, the house I grew up in, it was heated with a coal oven, like a wood burning stove hooked up to a pipe hole in the chimney of the fireplace. That's how we heated our house. Right? And if our farm had this thing on it, like, or the double wide version of it, which is what this is, or what you can get, which has a bedroom for me and my sister, as it were, as opposed to this is like a two-person unit. That is so much more superior to any house that was probably wiped out on the merits. I mean, Old Country Home, Hearth and Home, Dolly Parton's Christmas special. I get it. People aren't going to be very excited about that aspect of things. But as far as keeping your family warm and safe and having clean water and electricity and internet and all the things that come with modern life, the double wide version of this one is $60,000, and they deliver it to you probably for $12,000. And if your house was wiped out in a flood and you're recovering, and the government gives you $150,000 to move or build something, you could literally buy 3 of these units or 2 addendum units to this thing and have a house that only like a super rich person in the 80s or 90s could afford. That,
yeah.
And then this is because of, a lot of this is computer aided design. This is the advancement of that part of it. And then on top of that, the once construction costs to these kind of things drop to the floor with robotic assembly lines, which they are doing with a lot of these, the cost of them gets even smaller. This house costs less than a car.
Yeah, so container housing or container things like this have been around a while. And I think maybe the shift, so the reason they work is because all containers are the same. So if you were to set up a production line to make them, you just crank out the same thing every day, all day long, right?
Right.
Where people start to get a hang up about them in this case, just think of the container as the core building material, right? So if you're building a house from scratch, it's not a container. Like up to a certain point, everything's relatively the same.
Right.
Wood's common, drywall. You're pouring a foundation. It's a different shape, but it's still a poured foundation. It's made the same way. And then as you get more and more to the finished side, that's when things start to get custom or unique to you. And as you get closer to that spot, there's less volume inside those products. So it's harder to make money on it currently because volume decreases price in our current paradigm of how things are made. So the way I see robotics integrating into this is getting closer to those beginning spots and doing what I call high mix production. And robotics allow you to do that in at least with this new like blend of AI, I guess, as it's called. So if you were making the same car like Tesla, they just want to make a bunch of Model 3s. It's a high cost to do it, but it's not too crazy to basically set that thing up to always pump out the same car. But if you wanted to pump out 7 or 8 different cars out of that same line, it would be much harder to do. And that's what I'm talking about with housing. Like what you need to get to is a level of, you need an easy way to build it, which is commoditized. But the thing it makes needs to be a high mix, meaning a lot of things, but each one is a little different. Or, instead of a million things, it's like, 5 things that are 100 or 10 things that are 100,000, right? You make 100,000 of 10 things, or you keep going down the list. Like how far can you get before you can make a bunch of different things, a lot of things less, but together it's a lot, right?
Right.
So that idea of high mix, when applied to housing, it's going to be in the finished product side, and the structure of a container house, it's pretty fixed because a container is a
Right.
container. So, it's like a Lego, right? But if you could start to
Yeah.
change the actual container, the initial building block or the initial Lego, then you start to get into a more viable product in the housing market, because that's what people want. They want something unique, right? Or
Right. Well, so there's it's to that point, the container home concept has been around for a bit. It started as like a junky funky thing for people to do, and like they were like, I can buy a bunch of these things and slap them together. They're steel structures. They're not going to, they withstand hurricanes. It just stacked on docks and places. Why wouldn't they be great to live in certain circumstances? So they started working with those and building out, these elements. And then, the prefab world, which was based on kind of like country homes, because you used to be able to order a home from Sears and they would mail it to you in the middle of fucking Oklahoma, and you and your homesteader wife with a bigger mustache than you have and your kids that are somehow older than you are would assemble the goddamn thing like a small group of Amish. And right. And so like mail order homes have been around for a long time. They fell out of fashion because construction costs went down. Why? Because of immigrants. That's the fascinating part. Now that trend, the cost benefit analysis of immigration, people in Europe have already decided it isn't worth it. And the United States is moving in that direction as well in certain areas. And so how do you do that? Well, if you want the cheaper cost of labor, set up a prefab home factory in Mexico and then just ship the fucking things here. Why not? You just drive them across land. And the idea that you have one that could build based on, we'll just get these containers and we'll outfit them, versus, that's fascinating. This mirrored one is amazing, where they just cover the outside of mirrors so the house basically disappears into the woods. Like if you try to look, it's a little crazy. But anyways, once you can build it in that form, then you can go, actually, our form factor is this, and we just need metal panels. And we're building them basically like storage containers, but ours are 30 feet wide or whatever they are. And we build them here in 2 chunks. And we deliver them on a tractor trailer because they'll fit this way. And then they fold out when they get there and lock into place. You put like pins in them, like a fucking folding table, but the pins are, giant steel pins, and they're not going anywhere forever. So my point is that this kind of a house, this kind of a like cabin in the woods with this kind of fixtures and this kind of stuff looks like a fucking luxury hotel cabin in the Alps at an exclusive thing that like the Davos people stay at. And it's like $80,000 like these. Okay. So, and this is where it's headed. And you can see right here, this is a line of these things being built and prefabbed and they just, throw their little label on them and off they go. There are gatherings all over the fucking country. And these aren't even tiny homes. Somebody said tiny homes. These aren't even tiny homes. So, you could get tiny houses. They're super cheap. But these are reasonably sized, right? 2 of them, and they attach together in a modular fashion. This is where shit is headed. I would argue that if people are in tornado zones and flood zones and the like, that it used to be, I made jokes about, we're going to rebuild. Don't you mean repark? Because you didn't really build it. You just drove it up, took the wheels off. And the essence of that joke is that it's a mobile home that doesn't go anywhere. That's what bugged me about it. And there's a point to some of these homes, you could hook your car up to them and drive them out of the danger zone and then bring them back for real in a very short order. You go, okay, this is the part that stays, but the main house we can take with us. So just move everything into the main house, latch it up, shut the flap on it, and we're getting the fuck out of here. There's a flood coming. And then you save all your stuff as opposed to watching it washed away. It's really wheeled all the time. And this is, but the point I'm trying to make I want to get to the final part of this is that this is a thing that's been growing on its own. And it was slowly growing to the point where, in 20 years, what's available will be lovely and so cheap, and we'll eventually have a stock of these things, and da, da, da. And because of this is the fold out click one that I was talking about. The little these are big in Europe. They click into place, and then the snow doesn't collapse the roof. But the point is, we are getting very close to the point where, because of AI and because of automation, that 20-year window shrank to 10, then to 7, then to 5. And the people that are being flooded right now might be looking at, oh, how am I going to rebuild my house? But in 2 years, in a situation like that, people are just going to be provided with a stipend on what their house was, and they're going to have money left over from whatever their house insurance was, because the old house was insured for a lot. This will be insured for less, I guess, in the future, because you can replace it easier. It'll be cheaper. But they will have a new home back in their place relatively quickly. Then what happens if there's another flood and you get the new upgraded model? Your thing is insured like a car in a car wreck. And they go, oh, okay, you had last year's model. We'll cover that part. And then you can finance the upgrade. This changes the quality of life of every human being. The safety aspect of these things. People won't go, but it's my home, and if I leave it behind and it's gone, I have nothing. And you have these dumbasses who stay in their house and get killed. That can end in a couple of years. And it's because this process shortens and changes everyone's life. And that's without me getting to robot maids. I find this very inspiring. I like this guy too. This is the one. This is the bug out house.
A better talking point subject to like help to talk about the consequences of these things, like what it means when a house, in your terms, becomes disposable, or a house is a quarter of the price to build, and so that's a huge disruptor in our society, right? Because for so long, through the 90s, homes were the piggy bank. They're your retirement now, right? It was sold. People were sold on the idea that land was effectively a savings account, right? And still today, HELOCs are all about taking equity out of your home instead of a loan if you need that, right? So you've got two things happening. It's cost side drops, but then the value of existing homes will likely change. And if that happens, then there's a reshift or restructuring of that value. And in homes, it's easier to understand, right? But that's going to happen to everything.
That's exactly. And that's where the labor market, where the functioning structure of economies, I guarantee in a couple of years, you're not going to see a cut in benefits to Social Security being talked about anymore the way it's argued about now in terms of debt, because the cost of the services and the stuff that you get from Social Security is going to cadaver. So even if you cut benefits, the quality of life you'd be able to afford on that will crisscross. There's going to be this junction point in the graph where the cost of living at a high quality goes down so much, and the available funds that people are getting is still climbing. Before it levels off. This is,
so,
go ahead.
Well, this thing that I'm mentioning, it's very similar to what is being argued on the Republican side in terms of the budget, right?
Yeah.
So the entire thing is about a ledger. And on one side of the ledger is a tax cut that someone wants, and that costs a certain amount of money. Most people say it's about $4 to $4.5 trillion. So in order to get that, they're saying we need to save an equal amount, right?
Yes.
So you're doing this like math. Like the whole point of all the stuff I think that's happening is just basically like screw at people's mind enough to where they think that they saved somehow, some way, these guys saved enough money that it's okay, go ahead and do the tax cut, right? And it's a ledger thing, right? That's
Yes.
not unlike what we're talking about here. Like we're going to have to,
Right.
we have to think about these things as a ledger, right? So
Hmm.
right now, everything seems difficult to get because the cost side of the ledger is so high. And
Yes.
and there's a certain amount of income you have. So the income is lower than the cost. And then you go bankrupt because you got sick, right? Well,
Yes.
if the medical price, if the cost of medicine comes down, then that
Hmm.
equation doesn't work anymore, right?
Right.
Um, and there's a lot of scary stuff in between, but those are the things that we really need to start figuring out how to navigate right now.
Yeah. Well, and that's where Democrats, I think, need to start looking at these things, these efficiencies and the modernization of things. And you go to places, somebody was saying like those houses are worthless unless you have a parcel of land to put them on. There's a lot of cheap land in the country, but nobody lives there because there's no secondary infrastructure. And the
And
Democrats with
that's
the
where
infrastructure bill have partly solved that. That is already on process to be grown out for this particular purpose.
but that's where I'd say your megastructure thing comes in. Instead of megastructure, it's infrastructure. And if there's this
Yes.
place where there's a lot of cheap land, you can quickly build the infrastructure you need with the cheaper robotic labor. Like so
Mhm.
those things can balance themselves out as well. And all of this is happening while the equation of what you work, like what do you do for work to make the
Yeah.
money, and that's going to be affected by the
Yes.
products that we're buying and selling,
Hmm.
and to make all this stuff happen. So it's very complex,
Yep.
and
And
like
the people in
we're
charge are
heading
too
towards it like
stupid.
a freight train.
Right. And the people in charge are too stupid to even contemplate it. And I would argue that what Democrats can do on a political level to make sure that these advances benefit everyone, which in large part they will, just like the computer revolution benefited almost everyone, because the availability of computers, even in my shitty little school in Kentucky, has changed the available education for kids in where I grew up on a level that would have only occurred in an MIT lab in the 80s, right? In the 90s. It's so normal, we take it for granted in that regard. I'm going to show you one other thing because this is where government falls into the fuck around and find out category. See these little modular homes, they're very cute. They look very spacey, they look very Buck Rogers. Whatever. They arrive on a truck, all this kind of stuff. I don't know why it's selected. It's weird. These are made in China. They're sold on Alibaba, their version of Amazon, for $40,000, and it includes the taxes. So this is a cut that the Chinese government is subsidizing the tariff that Trump is putting on by cutting the price to even it out. Okay, so they can still punch through because they can afford to lower the price a tremendous amount because they can force workers. That said, which is terrible for the record. When you're talking about like, what are we going to do for work and what are people going to do as far as their investment, and your house was your investment, what happens when the price of it goes down? The Chinese economy is almost entirely based on real estate, and people have put their entire life savings into the future of real estate and apartments and condos that are already empty, unfinished, tofu dreg products that are eating shit and collapsing. They are the petri dish, the worst possible way to handle this advance that is coming. We are seeing it happen because there is no fucking reason for China to want any robots or any prefab homes. They should keep people busy making physical homes and hitting in every single little finishing nail by hand. Like even a nail gun is a waste of fucking time if you have that many idle people and you need to keep them working and you need to keep them doing something, but they're just blowing it off, which again, I got to say, points to the fact that I believe Lay's real talk is right. I think their population is well under 600 million at this point, and this has all been a lie. They're fucked. Otherwise, this makes no sense. None.
If you take the percentage of COVID deaths, average out all the countries, the average death rate was something like what, 1.5%? Was that what it was?
Yeah.
Something like that?
Yeah.
So multiply that by 1.2 billion. What is it?
Yeah. Yeah. Right.
It's
and
astronomically
there's no way they
huge.
lost. There's no way they lost less than 100 million people, and that would make sense. That would be why you would weld people into their apartments and keep them from going anywhere, and set up like armed guards to keep people from crossing certain lines. You wouldn't do that if you had 4,000 deaths in a $1.4 million population. You just wouldn't. It wouldn't matter. We have 80,000 flu deaths almost every year in the United States. We don't shut down the country over it. That's because it's factored in that we have 340 million people. It's not, and the death rate isn't that affected by it. It's people who maybe were close to death and the flu finished them off, or those kind of things. You wouldn't create this kind of military state unless the death rate was way over what you were saying. And again, so why is China in a rush to make robots? To replace the dead.
Well, also to sell them to everybody else.
To the rest of the world, right?
That makes all the motors. So I just said you can make a car out of a motor and wheel. They want to supply the motor and wheel, and then they come here, and an American company makes the chassis and the part that looks like the American wants it to look, basically function the way it like. The inside of a car is basically now a house, because the chassis and the drivetrain are done. They're fixed. And so what's left? It's the chairs and the TV screens and the what it looks like, basically.
And that's what people will be doing, because what you'll have is the cheaper a house gets, the nicer. Like, this is a handmade chair set that I got from a guy in North Carolina or Wisconsin or something. This guy, our countertops were made by so-and-so. Because if you do have any extra money or any extra effort or any personalization, you're going to have humans do it. That will be the commodity, is the specialty work. And it will be, that will be the sign of wealth, because, what's better about your mud hut? Well, my mud hut has a carpet, right? And that's what used to be the defining thing. How do you know who the chief is? Well, the painted symbol on his lean-to is readable after two rainstorms, because he was in a situation where he could, make somebody make it last. Whereas you just threw some mud on there and made the stain of your family's mark, and it washed away, and you don't know how to use the red clay to make, paint yet. We're getting at a dizzying speed closer to that. And again, I have to believe, first of all, I covered the Elon Musk thing yesterday, and I only got 15 minutes into his interview, and we're getting.
I got big feelings about all that stuff.
Oh, okay, yeah. So Elon Musk's illusion of brains is like a fucking mind virus in the White House, and it's failing everywhere else. Obviously, I think Tesla stock is 240 right now. And there are a bunch of day traders trying to sucker out the money as it's collapsing. But everybody's running for the hills, because what they're realizing is it's all talk. It's always been all talk. And if it wasn't for government contracts, this dude wouldn't have any companies at all. I would argue, I used to say except Twitter, but I would argue that even Twitter, because the fact that federal government accounts have to be on there because of just the history of reaching people and the assumption you'll need it for whatever reason, which I don't know why you wouldn't just make it Facebook or make it fucking Threads or something else like that. You go, oh, check Threads if you want to see what the real official story is. You could do that easily, but there's just this, everything moves very slowly. But
I mean,
he benefits from that.
It's just it's a state media. It's the new version of state media, but one guy bought it so that he had effectively a huge megaphone in terms of where his commercials went. And he can push the needle wherever he wants by just changing the algorithm. It's like a joke that, if you just start up any of them, a TikTok account, an Instagram account, and you then look at what it recommends on the first day versus maybe the 10th day after it figured out if you were a man or a woman and roughly how old you are. And it's comical. It's basically cat videos interspersed with girls that have big breasts, they're just it's what's the bliss point, salty sweet, but for your eyes, like
Yes. Yeah.
like
That's
it's
it. Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
effectively what's happening. It's this
It's
like
the
it's
impulse rack at a
emotional
gas station passing itself off as social media.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's yeah. So, that's why all of this technology that's happening, it's accelerating these things. And people, they're like, it's, we got to figure out how to use it to like
Yeah.
even out all of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's happening. I mean, that's what people have been using these things for.
Right.
You just have to kind of push through all of the stupid headlines that are trying to tell you one thing.
Well, they're
and
not
then,
all the headlines aren't stupid. Like I like this one, for example. This is
oh
a good
gosh, yeah, no,
this is a great
that's
example.
straightforward. It's telling you what it's actually telling you in the article.
Yeah. And the hits just keep coming. Wall Street is turning its back on Elon Musk. Gravity may finally be catching up to Elon Musk as Tesla stock crumbles. By the way, tumbles. I would argue that in the CNN business, gravity may be finally catching up is a reference to the fact that he's been bullshitting all along, and now people are realizing that. Or they're allowed now. There's an opening. There's blood in the water, so people can finally start going. Told you so. And other people are like, you know what? There's other stuff that I can focus on. I never really was that into that thing, and that it gives them an out, an off ramp.
He's been hedging for a while because he's been trying to call Tesla a software company, and the purpose for that is because he knew his valuation was way off. It's not a valuation of a physical product or a hardware company. It's that of a software company that people are speculating what it's going to become. So, and again, like everybody else catching up with, like vision, basically like vision recognition or like controlling things with vision, meaning cameras that can drive a car or cameras that can move a robot, like whatever that is. Nobody's going to have a monopoly on that. You can't.
Nope.
Like the cat's out of the bag already.
And his whole system was based on having a monopoly on it. In theory, the same thing is going to be true.
When he knew that the monopoly wouldn't happen, that's why he bought Donald Trump, so that he could basically choose to have the contracts. Like they're not even hiding it anymore. They're literally announcing contracts that they're giving to him while he's in there.
So Tesla stock is up like 4.5% today because there's a lot of day traders who are milking the fall. Now, interestingly enough, all the car companies are up at the same time. So that could be just the number of packages it's still in, or in these areas, or the buy low packages where people buy transportation. But look at Rivian. Rivian is and this is much closer to reality. Rivian is an electric car company. It does not have as many outstanding shares as Ford or any of these other things, but it's an American electric car company, and its stock is at $11.42, and that's reasonable. That is a reasonable stock price for an auto company. That is, and the same thing with, let's see what Ford's is. Ford's is $10. Ford. I mean, that's fucking Ford. Like, that's a company with real vehicles, lots of them. General Motors is $50 because it's been around, in large part on the stock exchange the longest. Ford was privately owned for longer or whatever. And so they also did other stuff and own other things. So they have a more diverse portfolio that drives up the stock price. And I don't know if this might be based on dividends, but still $50 for this. Meanwhile, Tesla's stock is at whatever, $240 right now. Yeah, 247, right? So there's going to be this spike, and there's going to be we hit bottom, and then the bottom's going to hit again, and everybody who's buying into this is going to eat shit again because that's what's happening. It's not going to here anymore. It doesn't have the merit for it. It's not worth it. And what's happening right here is, I guarantee, he's calling in markers, and so is Trump, and they're buying stock to inflate it. They're puffing it. That intentionally.
In general, the thing that strikes me is how many other people who are supposed to be smart are all around, like listening to these people and being like, oh yeah, they're the ones we're listening to. Like it, I never
No,
respected
you're
the
not.
guy, but I never really liked him. But Kevin O'Leary is constantly on
Right.
Fox. Like
Oh, Jesus.
he calls himself like the smartest guy in the room on his TV show. It's basically just another apprentice. And he's just
Right.
out there saying, "Oh yeah, this is right. All this is fine. No problem. I love these guys." Like it makes
And
no sense. So
well,
it's all the people
unless
around them
I'll
who
tell
are
you how it makes
just as
sense.
guilty.
Right. But I'll tell you how exactly it makes sense. It makes sense because he's got a bunch of Tesla stock. He wants to get out of
Of
it,
course.
and he doesn't. And he wants to get out.
He's pumping it.
He wants to pump it back up and go, it's fucking great. It's going to be great. And then it goes back up, and then he can go, all right, at the merits, it's never going any higher than this. Get it the fuck out. Or at least he can sell chunks of it, and then it'll start to crater, and then they'll do the same thing. And that's what's happening. People are getting out of this stock. And as they sell it, people are buying it and going, oh, well, I don't care. I'll put it as a diverse part of my portfolio. It's a little expenditure. So they'll buy it a little bit. And everybody's like, oh, they're buying, and the price goes up, and then it does this. But there's no reason for the fucking company to exist at this point. That's the weird part. It has no genuine
Tesla?
value. Yes, it's expenditures versus its value. Even in China is fucking dumb.
The part that I find shockingly fascinating is that the guy's got a huge factory in China that the Chinese government built. It's
yes, for him.
He's the American patriot, the guy that like who even knows what percentage of his wealth is either backed by the Chinese government or
right.
Or it's like, pump, like inflating what his is based on the factories, the gigafactory. And,
absolutely.
It's insane.
That's it. Yeah. And the idea that they can make or break his fortunes because just like they do with BYD, they can buy a bunch of Teslas in China and shelve them, pretend they were sold and go, look at how Tesla sales are doing. They can literally affect Tesla sales on his behalf and promise him something like, if you can sell, they'll buy 10,000 different, we sold 10,000 more units than we were expecting because who even knows if they were built in the fucking factory in the first place, if they're just, marks on a ledger. Yeah.
So I do a lot of like really early product development work for companies. And I've been doing, lately I've been doing a lot more, diversifying a little more and doing a lot more like support for manufacturing facilities,
right.
In the Midwest basically. And, basically any company who is on the development side, they've all just stopped. They literally all just stopped. And the main reason for that is because they just don't know what's going to happen. And that's the stupidest part of this whole thing is if you're going to put a tariff on, just put it on and let's move forward. Like if you're not, then stop. So it's the back and forth that is causing the trouble.
Right.
For everybody else, I should say. And oops, sorry, I just hit my mic.
That's okay.
And then on the production side, like American companies are getting more work, which is exactly what would happen if you put a tariff on. I mean, that's what's supposed to happen. So it makes sense. But also those companies are trying to increase productivity, meaning decrease labor, right? So,
right.
And the way you do that now is that you can do a lot more. Like, we have a machine shop, we support other machine shops. The way you do that is instead of one person per machine, it's one person for every 3 machines. And then can you get it to 4? And then can you get it to 5? Right. You see what I'm saying? So you can increase productivity in that way. But that to me is the most frustrating part is that it's only been 3 months, but we're coming up here on another quote unquote deadline that's totally made up. And,
the 100 days.
And, like, really, like, is he going to do it or not? And I think about it as like, as just him trying to like unilaterally negotiate everything, right? So it's, well, we negotiate as a group, and because we
Yeah.
negotiate as a group, everybody's got to get along. What he wants to do is he wants to blow up all the groups so that
Yeah.
what all these groups come to him because they want to negotiate directly with him. And
Right.
and nobody's kicking anything back in those situations, I'm sure.
No. Well, okay. So real quick, we had a Tesla bot in the chat who's very concerned about us downplaying the value of Elon Musk and his super genius and his Acme super battery packs. This is a used Tesla battery pack module that you can buy on eBay for $299. If you want to build a Tesla wall with leftovers, you absolutely can right now, and you don't even have to go to the shop. The other thing is that the entire audience for Tesla Powerwalls, home chargers for Teslas, is environmentally conscious Democrats, people with solar panels. And none of them are buying his solar panels, and they're effectively, the boycott is affecting every aspect of the Tesla business that exists currently. It's happening and again, most of the orders they're filling are from like government grants for solar programs in states that like red state guys friendly to Elon Musk were throwing him a bone, but the audience is disappearing.
Yeah,
and
it's hilarious that the people who were like boycott Target because they keep their DEI on are like, stop boycotting us, you're terrorists.
Why are you trying to destroy an American company? Right. Also, by the way, I'd like to say that my footage of the Vegas fire made it to Kimmel, but it also was on Fox News like all day on a loop. So nice. I'm being paid by Fox News this week.
Have you
18 nickels will arrive in my PayPal account at some point.
Have you trained your AI bot to do copyright claims on all those broadcasts?
Such a good idea. I don't have to, because there's actually there's a company called Storyful that contacted me, and they're like, we'll split it with you and we'll do all the work. And they split it 50-50, which is an absolute ripoff. If I did it for a living, I would do something better, but I don't care. And I was just like, but the overall, if you screw with your audience, if I came on my show today with my history of voting Democratic and being a Democratic booster and being a Democrat my whole life and caring about the issues I did, and then I threw a Roman salute, wink, wink, that all of a sudden and started talking about eugenics and and not to mention the fact that if I was like, by the way, I have an invention for a chip in people's brains, that Alex Jones and all of his ilk would go, told you, that motherfucker is, he's part of the transhumanist movement and wants to let Soros put a chip in your brain, right? He would think that of me. But my entire audience would turn, and they would be right too. Why would I expect them to fucking stay? And unless I have another product that I am going to direct towards a new opening frontier, which is, by the way, the Mike Pillow methodology. Mike Pillow realized there were like a bunch of betting companies out there, and he wore his little faux cross. And so all the Christians out there went, there's a guy unashamed to show his Christianity. Therefore, he's not mentioning it. It's not overt, but he's wearing it. So he's on the team. So I'm going to buy my pillows and my blankets from him. And that's how he built his entire thing. Former, possibly current crack addict, selling pillows to maggots and evangelicals based on symbolism, gang colors, effectively, right? But not because he actually did anything. Now, you would think Christians going, oh, the cross means he has standards in life. He believes in these things, and that's why we share this. That's why he wears it, because we share these values. That's why he wears the cross. And then you're like, well, then why would you suck up to a dude who was friends with Jeffrey Epstein for 25 fucking years, or hang out with, or promote the guy who wants Elon Musk to co-run the government because he's a transhumanist who thinks we're going to all be, bonding with computers and AI will be God, and all the phrases that used to set the right on fire are now okay. And yet, what are they saying? Democrats used to love Tesla. Like, no, we like the idea of electric cars and a lower environmental impact, and especially and technology that brings us into the future and gets rid of fossil fuels when we don't need them. That's what we liked. He was just the one person in town for a while. He had a head start. Why did he have a head start? Because Obama gave it to him. Because we wouldn't even know about fucking Tesla if Obama hadn't put the electric car support into the auto bailout that Trump was against, even to bail out the big three, much less Tesla. He was against all of them on the record multiple times. So these, for fuck's sake, like Tesla, and this is part and parcel to kind of to wrap up today. And Rob, I know we got into the deep reads today a bit, kids, but it's the whole point of this is that kind of analogy I've been using. These two trains have left the station, and you can see where they're going to hit. You know the speed, you know the track, you know that there are no turns between it, and eventually this collision is coming. And the people in charge,
but you can see where, you can see how.
Yes, exactly.
Or at least
and the people in charge currently are either totally mentally incapable, even processing that it's coming, or they know it's coming, and their only job right now is to bullshit people into thinking they're the person that can handle it. That's Elon Musk.
I think that there is to just pillage everything. So
yes.
You could argue that these things are going to collapse. They're going to collapse the norm, right?
Yes.
So if they're like, well, the norm, we're in control now and there is a norm, then the easiest way to extract all the money you can is to essentially burn it down. I mean, that's what mergers and acquisitions is usually about.
Right.
They go in, they buy a company, they go in and they say, what are the things that are the same as what we have? We're just going to sell all that off, get the cash.
Right.
And then, take a loan to buy it and then get the cash that's sitting in it. So I think that they're just taking the cash out of it. And
I agree.
The whole thing about the tariffs, like I'm positive that, in my opinion, and I'm positive of it, of course, is that it's a way for him to effectively get people to negotiate one-on-one with him. He's looking for whatever the kickback is, or the favor, or the anything. Or
they owe it to him specifically, not the country, not America. You're not negotiating with America, the American economy, the American people, our constitutional form of government. It's me, singular, Donald Trump. Whatever deal we get, you owe me. Now, also though, and this is the part of his brain that is missing apparently, is amongst others, is that if it doesn't go well and long term it hurts the trade relationship and they don't like it, they're going to blame him specifically, and then whoever is
also they're going to walk away. Like there's a sort of a constant theme that I never hear, and that is, why would anybody make a deal with Donald Trump? Because he breaks every deal. He breaks them all. So what is actually happening in Europe is saying, we can't make a deal with them, so we're not going to. We're just going to do it. And they might come over and, make him feel like he's being paid attention to. But when they're back home, they're building defense contractor plants. They're preparing for that their stuff in their own
on
country,
their own,
or buy it straight from China. So but as this stuff happens, I think it's important to understand that we can rebuild it. And it, in theory, oh, thanks, Mad Mac.
Mm-hmm.
In theory, as they destroy, we're going to have to rebuild it, right?
Yep.
They're not going to stop destroying. He's not going to stop until somebody makes him, somebody impeaches him, and so the only people that can stop him right now are the courts and the Republicans.
Yeah.
That's really important. And and I was very frustrated the week you were gone because of, and I'm going to say this and people are going to get mad at me, because of all the Chuck Schumer stuff.
Right.
people mad at specifically Chuck Schumer, and you only hear Chuck Schumer now. You don't hear the other 7 or 8, however many it was.
Right.
There was no other choice than to vote the way they voted.
Yes.
No other choice, because if they would have voted for the CR, then Trump would have gotten everything that he's trying to do right now.
Yeah.
And he would have shut the place. It would have shut down and it would never reopen.
Right.
And how do you know that? Because that's what he's trying to do now.
Well, vote
anyway,
if they had voted, if they had voted like against closure initially or whatever, but against the CR itself, or force the closure so that they couldn't vote for the CR, he would have just left it shut down. He would have just watched things atrophy that they don't like, because here's what happens. Yes. When you have a shutdown, the first thing, we always talk about the parks. Remember how, like, anytime there's a shutdown, we always talk about the parks. That's because the government, like a body with hypothermia, the extremities start to go to protect the internal organs and the overall life. So your arms and your fingers get frostbite first, the tip of your nose, that kind of stuff. That's where it starts to go, but well before it gets to your internal organs, right? He would just let it go until the arms were missing. That's honestly what he would have done.
And where the way that he's trying to, like, effectively just do stuff, even though the law says not, he doesn't care. He's just going to do it. So what is it? The story is when you have a shutdown, it's what do they call it? Employees that they have to have, like emergency. Not emergency.
Yeah, essential employees stay on. Yeah, essential employees.
So you know what he would have done? He would have said everybody's an essential employee, including the courts. He would have used it to try to shut down the courts. And what does he need right now? He needs the courts not to be doing anything, right? The Republicans would never have come to the negotiating table. The Democrats wouldn't get anything for that. So the whole thing, this cloture thing, it's basically the filibuster. Like, yes. And we've been arguing as Democrats to get rid of the filibuster for what, 20 years?
And yet it saved us, right?
So, and that's the funny part about this situation, is that right now the Republicans have been really good at putting Democrats into situations where they had no good choice.
Well, it's the Zod effect.
When they make a choice, they're getting crushed because and so the thing, in my opinion, that Schumer and whoever was voted for whatever against the CR, whatever it was, do what they did.
For cloture, they voted against the actual budget, but for cloture so that it could go through. So they didn't end up having to vote for it. But Gene Shaheen, I think, voted for it, and Angus King, who's an independent.
Yeah, it basically evens out, and it's like whatever. So the point I'm trying to make is that what they should be doing is they should be out every single day they should be asking Fox News to bring them on, all this stuff, and they should be laying the choices on the Republicans and explaining to people, like, hey, here's why we're not going to vote for this thing. Here's why we have to let it through. Because if we did, ABC would happen. If we don't, ABC will happen. And it's better that, your whole thing, like, if you have two evils, choose less evil, right? They chose less evil. That's what they did.
And you don't get to
now. We would have been in a shutdown right now, and all this crazy news with sending people to El Salvador and all this, it would have been drowned out by it's the Democrats' fault that the government shut down.
Well, I'll go even further than this, because that's the PR storyline, and that happens a lot in social media and the like. But here's what materially happened by the CR happening. The budget that went through the House adds Trump's tax cut, the extension of his tax cut, and an addition of $4 trillion to the national debt on that. The Senate bill added $380 billion to it and paused the debt ceiling stuff for the next year or what have you, which would allow Trump to basically just shove that other $4 trillion through, or get his tax cut through using that methodology, fuck with the numbers enough. So both budgets, House and Senate Republican budgets, whichever one went through, even though the Senate one was less awful than the Republican one, both gave Trump his tax cut by the end of the year. The CR eliminates Trump's being able to get his tax cut through spending shuffles and all that kind of shit through the rest of the year. They don't have the votes to do it within the House because conservative Republicans, like hyper maggoty Republicans like Chip Roy, aren't going to vote for that kind of a raise in the debt ceiling. That was the fight that was happening. Mike Johnson's own people are trying to explain to the people that want it to happen why they shouldn't go for Mike Johnson's head. I have shown that guy on the floor doing a fucking 45-minute economics class on why you can't fucking do it, dummy. And the Senate, they know better as well. They just want to punt a little bit of it and make it easier to at least look like they're trying to sell it. Thune is trying to look friendly to MAGA while positioning himself to run against Vance in the future, which I think that's going to be the big fight in their party. But the CR, we've got 3 seats up for grabs and 2 Democrats returning to seats because of special elections. There's a very strong chance that by November, the balance of power could either shift to the Democrats in the House by 1 vote or 2, or even out, and they still don't have the votes in the House to push the budget that they have created. So Democrats have a lot more leverage and all that kind of stuff, and so the tax cut will not go through. If it had gone through now, if they had not voted for cloture on this and there was a shutdown, and the only thing that the Republicans would have to enter into is, we'll reopen the government, but this is the budget. And that reopening budget would include the tax cut and all this other stuff. That's what they were hoping to leverage. That's their fallback plan is to blame Democrats and create this storyline. But the reality is he was trying to shoehorn through, he was trying to like crowbar in his tax cut. Schumer took that away. They took it away. They allowed cloture because they knew that the Senate didn't want the House bill. And so by allowing cloture on the CR, the Senate would go, well, we're not going to get ours because the House fuckers are against it. But a CR we can do in the Senate with just a majority of votes. And so we'll do a CR. That was an amazing, it wasn't beyond even, and I know this is shocking to people in the audience, that was not just the lesser of two evils. It was a great plan to make it happen. It required massive manipulation of the Republican voting bloc in both the House and the Senate. It wasn't just less than optimal. In this circumstance where you're out of power, it kneecapped the tax cut. And I can't stress this enough. It actually tactically was fucking smart. It wasn't like, well, sorry, guys, we didn't know what to do. They knew exactly what to do in this circumstance with the power they had. They used it and they fucked him into a cocked hat. Thune can't bring the fucking House bill up for a vote because it won't pass. The Senate doesn't have to now, so they can, and what's going to happen is they will pass their extra border funding that Trump wants as a supplemental, and Democrats will do that as a favor because it also goes to the courts. It's based on this funding that was in the original, bipartisan border bill that was up. So not only am I sick of people going, oof, oof, why wouldn't they fight, blah, blah, blah. When they shut down the government, it is a wrecking ball to large parts of the economy, and it's the poor people that get hurt first. Absolutely. The Republicans aren't going to feel any pain for months into this kind of shit, and then they'll buy at wholesale prices.
Shutting down the government is what Trump is currently trying to do lawlessly, right? So the message should have been the government is getting shut down no matter what.
Right.
If we vote for it or we vote against it, it doesn't matter. He's trying to shut the government down. And the only people that can stop him are the Republicans in the Senate and the House. What are they? Why are they not stopping him?
Yeah, that's the message.
Everything should be followed by that. Everything. This happened. The Republicans could have prevented it. This happened.
Schumer's biggest problem. Right. Schumer's biggest problem is he's a dweeb. He's socially awkward. He's not, he doesn't come across as forceful. He's there because of functional seniority. And again, this is one of those things where, like Biden to some degree, he's not the most dynamic dude, but he knows how shit runs and he was able to get stuff done. He was able to get an infrastructure bill through when other presidents that were far more, in theory, popular than him, including Obama and Trump with their own bases, they couldn't get it through. They couldn't shoehorn it through. Biden managed to fucking do it. And he didn't do it by, being a fighter in like everybody's asking for. He used the leverage they had and managed to get it through. And that is going to materially change the lives of millions of people, because just the part where they remove lead pipes from the drinking water system over the next 10 years is going to save lives, period. hundreds of thousands of lives. I mean, I don't know how you even extrapolate the birth defects and other shit and the fall-on effect of that, okay? And so Schumer is boring like Biden in that regard, and is not an exciting speaker, and is not great at, the senators deal with certain things. It's like listening to an accountant or a CFO. Go watch one of the business channels. They talk in such jibber jabber all the time, and they jump back and forth between jargon and bad analogies that you're like, what the fuck are you guys talking about? But they clearly know what they're talking about because they all went to school for it and they deal in these areas, but they're talking the language of the people that they deal with all the time. That's Schumer's problem, period, end of story. That's why I'm here. That's why I'm here to tell you that, like, what they did was protect the most vulnerable people from a minority position that they possibly fucking could. And we, the voters, put them in that minority position. I don't want to hear shit about strategy or tactics on the Democratic side that you don't like when we're in the minority in a circumstance like this. It is on us.
The only way Democrats could have actually had a negotiating place, like a place to negotiate, was if they had more than 50 senators, which they don't.
Right.
And so they couldn't. There's nothing they can do. And that doesn't make them weak. It's our fault that they're not there because Americans didn't vote for them. They voted for someone else. And now we're in this situation. And if we spend our time crapping on Democrats for a situation like this, we're not spending our time. We're not using the
crapping
words
on
it's Republican fault.
Right.
We need to be using
all
our
of
words
this.
to say everything is their fault. And if the only ones that can fix it are them, and they need to start fixing it. And if they can't, then you've got the perfect thing for in the next elections.
Agreed. We're over time, but I'd like to point out that, you know what Chuck Schumer ultimately did? What did Chuck Schumer ultimately actually do? He allowed the Republicans to vote for an extension of the Biden budget. That's what a CR is. Biden actually had a budget. They actually pushed one through, and they voted to continue Biden's budget.
The message is simply, we made it so that they voted for Biden's budget.
Yes.
It could be that simple.
That's what actually happened. That is actually what occurred. And again, somebody like V.D. Hertz has delayed the inevitable. No, it didn't. Because again, there's a window when he can get his tax cut through before he has to start dealing with the ramifications that the tariffs are not going to work out and produce the economy that he thought, all those things. And it's right now, you could argue, kind of like the ACA, that if you start right away and you just start moving in your first 100 days and you're able to do this thing, it's easier to do because you have the flow of the election behind you. But once the economy starts to settle in, more to what, the ramifications of what Trump is doing, then the idea of extending his tax cut gets harder and harder and harder and harder. And it's not going to get better. It is not. And they know this. That's why the Republicans were in such a bum rush to do it.
Right. And the only way you can slow Trump down right now is is basically in the courts. And the courts, it's happening. Right. It's going to take time. It's going to happen. And everything that he breaks when we're in power, we can do it back. I mean, they're short. So the argument against the filibuster is, yes, perfect. Don't TYT ourselves.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's a TYT way of thinking of things. And it's fucking dumb. They're not fighting. They're punching vulnerable people in the face and saying, did you see what that guy did to this person? That's the TYT methodology. Fuck those guys.
It's their fault that we punched you, right? So as I said, there's a ledger. And one thing it would have done is he would have tried to keep it closed as long as possible because he's like, that's what I'm going to do anyway. So you just gave me the keys to lock all the doors on the government. And look, we just saved, and he'll lie, we just saved $8 trillion. So it's no big deal. Now we can give tax cuts for 4 because we just saved 8, right? But separately, the purpose, everybody's been talking about the filibuster. We've talked about it in the positive, and we've talked about it in the negative. And so have the Republicans. They're like, why don't we just get rid of this thing and we can?
Everybody hates it when they're on the other side, right?
Exactly. But so for just a second, if there was no filibuster, then the Senate would be just like the House. It would be a simple
Yes.
majority, right? So with a simple majority in the times that this is in play, then you affect change faster, but
Yes.
you also change it back faster when you get back into power. So
Hmm.
it becomes a back and forth, but effectively what they did is they didn't use the filibuster. That's all they
Yeah.
did. They didn't vote for
Right.
the thing, but they're being yelled at, or they're being like protested against as if they voted for it. And
Right.
that's the most frustrating thing. Like, we got to stop using our energy for that.
Yeah, it's a waste of time. And again, it created a situation where it screwed Trump out of his tax cut passing this year,
Right.
more than likely at all. And that is going. He's gonna be fucking pissed when the people around him tell him or they figure it out themselves. But he's not going to be able to do it between now and, let's say, June. That was when his biggest window for being able to do it is. And then as costs continue to rise, which they are, and as the tariffs don't bring in the money he says they're going to bring in, which they aren't, it's going to be even harder to justify a tax break in this situation. And also, Musk and his dipshits are not going to find $1 trillion worth of waste, fraud, and abuse. They're going to pretend. They're going to lie about it like they're doing right now, but it's never even going to reach that point of it. And you have to get to at least a 1.5 trillion in savings to justify the tax break again. And they're not they're not going anywhere near that shit. So I know we're
I saw your thing.
Yeah.
Sorry. Real quick. I saw your thing yesterday where he was with Ted Cruz, and like the message there is, why, like, Republicans need to ask for proof. Republicans need to ask for proof.
Yes.
So they're just taking his word for it. Nobody's like, their job in Congress is to ask for proof, is to oversight.
That's what oversight is.
That's what oversight is. So, like, if the pressure here is to turn the congressional Republicans on Musk, not Trump, on Musk. Mm-hmm. Because Musk is running ramshot through it, and Trump will just come right along with Musk. Sorry, I'm mixing up. Okay, I'll stop now.
That's okay. And so just like saying, Hal said the CR was merely an extension of the Biden budget, which is false. It gives Trump the power to impound and reallocate spending. All budgets in the administrative, like the slush area of the budget, allows them to move stuff around. It does not allow them to wholesale eliminate funding for programs, which is what he's trying to do. And that's why legally the Department of Education has to continue to exist. Legally, USAID has to continue to exist, because and that not just from the budget of last year, which promises into the next fiscal year until April, but the continuing resolution, which would go past that, would allow for the continued funding of USAID as a singular department and the Department of Education. And it makes it legally unconstitutional for him to remove that, because the Congress has said we are funding that department going forward even further. Even if they cut the funding or lower it, they still have to pass a law to eliminate it entirely. And even choking it off doesn't happen that way. I'm telling you, like,
those laws are subject to the filibuster.
Right. That's where you would go. That's where you filibuster him allocated, that kind of thing. And I want to thank, by the way,
filibuster is the law they passed to eliminate the education department. That's what you filibuster. Because you want to stand up for the education department.
That's right.
Otherwise, Trump is trying to get rid of it anyway. He's writing every executive order he can to say, I get rid of it. And they're like, whatever. Like, so that's the fight, right?
Yeah, those are written in fucking crayons.
Exactly what he's doing, what he's wanting to do.
Yeah. So we're well over time, and I got to go, and I know you do too. And before we get to another bathroom break, but again, May 3rd, Chicago. I want you to come down and be a part of either the live show, or we'll do a special addendum in the same venue or whatever. I'll talk to CPT and we'll figure that out. And we'll do a live Friday AI, and I'll bring all my stupid AI devices that I've been building, and we'll have a show and tell. It'll be like a Hal's Techie Science Fair. So
you're welcome to come by if you need anything during that weekend as well.
Oh, we'll definitely hang out anyways, because you're a good hanging person as well, brother. So anyways, thanks everybody.
I maybe can take you to the new shop then.
Oh, we should do a live from the shop then. If I mean, sure, the internet can
I
handle
don't
it.
know if it'll be because we move in on May 1st. Wait, what did you say? May 3rd? It won't be
May
ready
3rd.
on May 1st. But the next time you're in,
Yeah,
we'll go to the
after
shop.
that. Okay,
Yeah.
deal. I'm totally fine with that. But yeah,
You're gonna like fall over. You're gonna be so nerding out.
Oh man, I'm gonna bring a fucking cot. I'm gonna bring a cot. You're not gonna get me out of there. And next time on Friday, a recent. Whoop, this is upside down, I guess, or is it? Let's see.
Oh, that's cool.
Yeah, it's the sleepy eyes or whatever. This is a little AI, like autonomous AI device Kickstarter thing based on an Arduino setup that I've been playing around with, super cheap or whatever.
Nice.
But it sets up certain. It's one of these things that, like, if you had a magnet on the back of it, you could walk it into a hotel room you're in as a spy and throw it up on any magnetic surface, and it'll just watch for anybody you don't know. And let you know. It'll either text you like, "Hey, there's a guy in your room, and it's not the maid, it's not the housekeeper, and here's a picture of his face, and I told him to get the fuck out, and he said this, and whatever." Like it's that kind of thing. Like this is like an entire Bond movie could be done over stupid little devices like this that almost anyone can make. So, anyways, appreciate you, and I will see you. In a couple of weeks in person, and next week for sure. So there he goes, ladies and gentlemen.
Bye,
Rob Glenn.
everybody.
All right, cheers. Thank you. Oh, I wasn't in preview mode. And I dumped him out early. Oh yeah. Anyways, thank you guys as well. And real quick before I go, regular show this afternoon, and let me pop in the chat so I can see you guys. Regular show this afternoon. We'll be on Substack. We'll be on Instagram, all the regular sites there as well. I think the theme of today was there are two trains that have left the station. They are going to collide at some point in the near future. The question is when, and the people who are operating the switches on the tracks have no fucking idea how to handle when it happens, or have already thrown the switch that guarantees it and don't know it. And that's what we're going to be dealing with on top of all the other just kind of Trumpery bullshit. Don't get distracted by the blather and noise and Canada 51st state horse shit. It's nonsense. It is meant to distract you from what's really happening, so they can lay the blame somewhere else. And again, 100%. I don't give a fuck if I'm the only person saying, "Well done, Chuck Schumer." And even the people criticizing him, I know you're doing it with goodness in your heart. But I'm here to tell you, we are responsible for why they have such limited capability in this circumstance. We are. Our values are showing up in the same way that maggot values are showing up, in that there were not enough of us that thought it was important enough to elect Harris, and this is the path we're on. And these are the tools we have. And I don't want to hear it. I don't it's lazy as fuck. I'm not going to join. Zero Dem hate. Don't need it. Not all fighting looks like fighting. We are in a situation. The analogy I used the other day when I was talking to my mom about this was that everybody in the stands is at a fucking gladiator fight. Your gladiators like in there. No, you've taken away their shield. You've taken away their spear, and there's a lion in there with them, and you're yelling, "Punch it in the forehead, you pussy." That's what they're saying. Yank its balls. These are your two options. If he doesn't yank its balls or punch it in the forehead, he's weak. Well, I think at this point, running and then trying to find other ways to make it injure itself or wear it down or climb where it can't or do those kind of things. That's what it's not sexy, but that's what you have to do when you're in an arena with a lion and you have been disarmed by the very people that should have armed you and who are sitting in the fucking stands yelling, "Punch it in the forehead with your fist." We need a fighter. punch the tiger in the face. Okay. Use your other fist, Stumpy, is I guess the recourse of that. So I honestly, focus all your attention on the damage Republicans are actively doing. Period. So anyways, other than that, I have no opinion. I'll see you this afternoon. I adore all of you, and just hit the like, share the show. I know on Friday we don't get these super chats because I think people are like they've got nosebleeds from the conversation that we're having in some cases. They're like, I can't. But patreon.com/HalSparks, etc., etc., etc. And I will see you this afternoon and continue to be right about all this, if you don't mind. Forgot. I want to thank all the maggots and the trolls today for showing up and expanding us out into the megaverse. Because without you, we wouldn't be in the algorithm as big as we are. Because you obviously get mad enough to type something at me. So thank you very much, and I also appreciate you not N-bombing or F-bombing or using at least using your big boy and your big girl words. So thanks for that.